G'day everyone and welcome back to the Crooked Lines podcast. My name's Tom. I am joined by Father Sam as normal. And today we are going to be discussing angels and demons, the art of spiritual warfare.
Looking forward to this one. It should be exciting. Slightly controversial, maybe.
No controversy here whatsoever. Let's have a look.
Everyone's completely calm about this topic at all times.
There will be no fighting online whatsoever about this one. Everyone will completely agree with everything.
I look forward to the cohesion in the comments.
All right, so let's get straight into it, Father. Angels and demons, are they real? What's their story?
Well, they absolutely are real. They are spirit creatures. They are made by God. And so it's a very important part of our Catholic understanding of the creation of the universe. And so it's God didn't make demons in and of themselves. They are fallen angels. So it's God made angels to know, love, and serve Him as part of the goodness of His creation. And it was by virtue of their rebellion that they're considered to be demons.
And it's just one decision, right?
One decision.
Like it's like you had one thing to do as an angel is to say yes, and they've just gone, no.
That's right, exactly. Because angels, they exist outside of time, so they're not bound like we are. You know, the fact that we go through time means that we have sequential decisions. Mm-hmm. We can say yes to God in one moment and no to God in another. Whereas for angels, they don't have a body. They are pure intellect, which means that at the moment of their creation, they're not learning. They're given everything that they need to know. For their purpose, for their function, for everything. And so they really only have one decision to make, and that is yes to God or no to God. And so that's kind of that story behind the fall of the angels, those who chose to reject God for whatever reason they found for that. They did so, and that's kind of angels and demons.
That's it. And look, we're told we've got guardian angels, right? Each person has one, although apparently priests sometimes get a second one, I heard.
Yes, I've heard this, and I haven't looked a lot into angelology or demonology, but look,
that's not bad, eh?
Yeah, if it's true, I'm all for it.
You're loving it.
That's right.
Loving
exactly.
life.
It's just but which one do I ask for intercession, or are they fighting over my intercessory prayers? Who knows?
Can't be. Well, look, I heard as well, and this is probably interesting to note, especially as we delve deeper into this, the power of angels and demons. Like sometimes we don't realize how powerful they are. Like I once heard that, our guardian angel can literally destroy the universe in a second. It's got that power to do that. It obviously doesn't because it does the Lord's will, but
wouldn't be a very good guardian of the galaxy, would it?
Or it would be a very good guardian of the galaxy because no one would mess with it, right? And anyway, it's interesting to note that because a lot of the time we can, call upon our angels thinking, oh, they might help with this little thing or this little thing. But actually, like we need to be calling upon them. I think, who was it? Padre Pio. St. Padre Pio was the one that said we don't pray to them enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're just so powerful.
Yeah.
All right. So how do they show up in our culture then? Like we hear a lot of different things. They can show up in films. They can show up in music. They can show up in exercises, like we've got Yoga and Reiki we might touch on, or even products. I mean, we've even had there's been a bit of controversy. You've been ribbed by a few people for drinking this thing right here, a Monster can, because people have accused you of essentially drinking something satanic.
Exactly, something demonic about it. Now I haven't there's a lot of kind of strong opinions about this kind of stuff, but we'll get into the details of what the different presences may be of things that are demonic. But I think that might be one such example of a particular culture that is arising, which may be, I think, giving too much credit to the presence of demons in everything. And I think it can really affect the serious discourse in religious language and in the efforts of evangelization, because this overemphasis on almost seeing the demonic in everything or the satanic in everything from the outside makes the Christians seem very unreasonable. And there is it's all very real. Like there is absolutely the reality of angels and demons and their presence and the impact on our spiritual lives. But when there's an overemphasis that steps outside of reason, it can become very unhealthy spiritually.
Yeah.
And so I think the monster controversy, it may be one of those examples of something being, kind of foisted upon us that is somehow doing more damage. Now, it's probably the caffeine might be doing more damage than anything. But
Yeah, you do seem a bit funny every time you drink that.
yeah,
Monster
that's right.
Cans.
Yeah, a little bit more jittery, perhaps. But look, it's one of these things where I don't claim to say anything definitive, but it might be one such example of the overemphasis that I see kind of really taking shape now, especially with internet
Yeah.
subcultures and things like that.
Yeah, look, I'd agree with you there. But even looking at this as an example, let me just ask you a question here, right? One of the problems with this is they reckon that the monster 3 symbol here is three separate 666 symbols in Hebrew, right?
Sure.
Now, of course, the number 666 doesn't look like that in Hebrew, apparently, but individually they do. If that's the case, right, let's look at the benefit of the doubt here with those that really are worried about something like this. What's the danger in that? If it is, for example, purposefully done that way, we don't know, but if it is.
Well, look, I think it would be something like, so are you saying in the example where the creators of the product very intentionally
Yes.
placed it there? Okay, so
Yep.
I think that would be, in that particular instance, if you were to then know that for sure, and they were to put out something that in some way is giving glory to evil in an intentional way, then I think it would be okay if somebody was ignorant of that fact. But if they kind of knew that and then kind of began to kind of revel in the evil being seen as something good or cool or whatever, then I think that can open a real spiritual danger, because it's kind of like an intentional cooperation with something that's supposed to give glory to Satan. If that was the case. And so I would say in this particular example, if someone were to pull up the creators of Monster and demonstrate factually this is exactly what they've done, they've made this decision intentionally,
Which people
then,
have tried to do that.
and I mean, if that's the case and it's shown to me, I'd stop drinking it tomorrow, because I don't want to be associated with or cooperating with any kind of material evil, because I think that just can lead to scandal. But until then, there's we have to use our reason as well. When it comes to the spiritual life, we don't just turn off our reason and then start believing every single claim that's made. Otherwise, we'll be led down we'll just be led astray, and basically be overwhelmed by fear.
And I mean, it's probably important to say as well, it's not like, even if that were the case, that this can hold some type of possession, that if you drink it, it's going to like possess you or something like that as well, right?
It would it's technically that would be an infestation. Infestation of the demonic is the attachment of some spirit or entity to an object, or a particular place. And there's a few different categories of that which we can step through as well, if you like.
No, interesting. Well, let's leave the monster can for now. One more that's a bit more controversial, I think you get a bit more reasoned arguments here, is in regards to film and music, for example. We did the K-pop episode. Some people were genuinely worried about that. And I agreed with some of that. Like, there are some songs in there which are very, like we said during the episode, are very clearly have the demonic pitted very well. Like they do it really well. And obviously it could be a danger to kids who are singing these songs who maybe don't understand the spiritual life as much. But another very big one and popular one is the Harry Potter series. I've never read it myself. I've seen some of the films. I was never sort of into them, but that's an interesting one, right? Because there's a bit more in that. Have you heard anything about them? I think you've read them. Is that right?
So I think I read up to the fifth one. I stopped reading them because I just found Harry kind of insufferable. He became he became just a whinger after a while, and and
he does seem like that.
He's
Actually,
just
in the
kind of
films,
he's just not he's. I don't know. He's always complaining. But anyway, that's besides the point. I'm sure everyone was going to love that comment. But in any case, I think it was. I certainly remember when they were rising to the height of popularity. There was a lot of controversy around this, because it is depicting things that are fantastical, that kind of have elements of the demonic. I don't think the expression of those things in art is of its own nature inherently bad, because then you'd have to then make the argument that, Dante's Inferno is likewise intrinsically evil, because it's describing,
Evil
the
very well.
mechanics of evil in possibly one of the greatest forms of literature.
Yeah.
So it comes down to what is the story here? What is actually being expressed in the kind of use of
Spot
these
on.
these images, and is there something there that is an inherent danger, or is it something that we can look at critically? So in the case of Harry Potter, my major concern would not be the depiction of those themes in art. It would be, does it create a fascination with the occult? And are those who are watching it then growing in the desire to themselves in reality get more involved in spell casting, magic, the occult, and those things?
Interesting. Yeah.
That's the line that I would draw, where I'd say this is there's potential for scandal,
Yeah.
because it's opening people to a desire for the spiritual outside of what is good and holy.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that might be the case from what I've heard. Like I said, I haven't read them, I've watched them, but I know there are a lot of arguments out there that Harry Potter blurs the lines between what's real and what's fantastical quite well. Like there are other films that are very clearly fantasy,
Yep.
whereas this one is almost like it blurs the lines a lot more between fantasy and reality, which could create this fascination you're talking about. My issue with Harry Potter was actually more what you were saying before, is the actual themes inherent in the film. Like one example that really I thought was worrying in what I saw about it was, a lot of the times, or there were some points where the good characters, Harry and the other ones, were basically using an evil spell or evil means to reach a good, and it wasn't seen as bad because good came of it.
Okay, yeah.
And so that for me is the most worrying, because generally, like, all heroes do bad things, but generally it's looked at as bad in the film. Whereas here, when they use an evil spell and it turns out that they've done something good with it, suddenly it's okay.
Yeah.
And so that for me is the biggest danger. It's like, hold on, they're really starting to push, actually some evil is all right if you can have good that comes out of it, right?
If you can justify it, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. And I mean, that's I think that's would be more worrying at kind of the moral level. I think when it comes to engagement with any form of art, especially that which is not expressly evil, like pornography or something like that, it's going to come down to the question of to what degree is the viewer able to engage critically and rationally, or are they somebody who is susceptible? And so I think this is where a strong argument for like children can come into play.
Yeah,
because I think it would be the wrong approach to say, oh, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. It's all just fantasy. All kids will be fine. Just let them sit down and watch it and just receive whatever message it's giving. I think that's an absurd, position to think that there is nothing contained within it. But if you've got somebody who a parent with their child who's able to explain things, or to whatever degree the parent is comfortable, or just a rational person, they can engage with that media in a way where, like you've just said, you're able to separate out the good from the bad. You're able to find elements within it that would have a Christological arc, where you would see like a redemptive qualities and things like that. For me, it's a question of what is the mind of the viewer? How are they able to engage with this media? Is it something that's going to lead them to sin, or do they have the critical capacity to see it for what it is? Enjoy that which can be enjoyed, and to leave behind that which is not good for the soul.
And I think the opposite is true as well, because you were saying if you look at it from one end, it's a bit ridiculous if you start to say there's no problem with it, you can do whatever you want. On the other side, people that say, oh, it's hugely problematic because it has black magic and all this stuff. It's like, well, the Lord of the Rings has black magic. That has evil. But I know no Christian who says any bad word about the Lord of the Rings, because it's phenomenal. And it's a beautiful story about good, evil, and whatnot. So it's not just that if there's magic in it, you got to avoid it, because no one would say that about the Lord of the Rings, right? But And so that's not the issue here either. It's like you're saying, we can't be in the two extremes here. We've got to be very measured about what's actually in there.
And the answer may be different for different people and for different audiences. And I
Yes,
think it's
spot on.
one where the problem with this kind of discourse is there must be one answer. Is it Harry Potter equals good or Harry Potter equals bad?
Yep.
And the fact of the matter is, with any kind of art, there's the further question of the capacity to deal with it. Now, I would have, once again, like the example of the monster can, if I found out that there was a explicit intention for this to be the vehicle of pushing something expressly
Yep.
demonic, and that was a intention of the filmmakers, of J.K. Rowling, all the rest of it, then I wouldn't touch it with a 9-foot pole.
Yeah.
Because I think in that instance, it's like, well, I just don't want to participate in that. Whereas, as far as I'm aware, that was not the intention, and so I think it's something which just has to be viewed critically.
Yeah. So look, we've gone from products to now sort of art, film, music. Let's look at a bit of a deeper one here, and things like yoga and Reiki and whatnot, where these are obviously very controversial. And in fact, the church has spoken out mentioning yoga, Reiki, things like that as being problematic. So what's the issue here? Because we're sort of going deeper and deeper into this realm with this now.
Look, I think all of these practices where there is the promise of some kind of power outside of God's grace. I think that's where it becomes problematic. It's almost like in the same way that magic is like the harnessing of energy, for one's own purposes and those kind of things. To look for an answer, the solution to problems from spiritual forces outside of God's providence and grace. That's where the problem arises. And so it's kind of people will make the argument with yoga that the particular bodily posture, is an inherent evil because it's giving glory to like an ancient god of sorts. But at least rationally to me, that I struggle with that position in the sense that it would be a problem if that is the intentional reason for it. But you can imagine a circumstance where somebody stretching strikes the same pose. Do they inherently, just by manner of bending in that way, all of a sudden giving glory to an ancient pagan deity? I don't think so. But where it becomes problematic is the promises surrounding those practices. Something like Reiki is like the rearrangement of energy. When it comes to yoga, there's some of the mantras and things are really calling upon a different kind of power than what is understood in a Christian worldview.
And the spoken word has a lot of power even without intention. Sometimes just by speaking something.
And I think it's simply the opening of oneself to or almost enthroning oneself like in a position of power. I'm going to exercise this particular practice to yield a power that's outside of just the physical. It's not physiotherapy. It's it's not those things. It's looking for a spiritual power of sorts that you want to be in control of. And I think that's where the problem comes. Whenever you're looking outside of God for answers, that's where you're creating a spiritual opening, which I think can be very, not only problematic, but dangerous.
Because even if that's not your intention, if you're just going to yoga because you want to exercise, there's a danger in you not knowing what some of the things you're saying or whatnot means, because it could open you up to this. And then we've got sort of like moving on from there, related quite closely, is the really explicit stuff, like say tarot cards or even the witchcraft, Satanism, stuff like that. I mean, this is all the fantastical stuff that you see in films and whatnot, but it's a reality as well. And I'm sure you've experienced this reality, and as a priest or.
I mean, this stuff is this. Now, it's not something to be, intentionally scary about it, but this stuff is real in that people do engage with it in a serious manner. And so, kind of carrying on from the Reiki or the yoga question, I think the easiest principle to hold to is this understanding of what occult means. Occult simply is the Latin word for hidden or like secret, right? So it means that it is either hidden knowledge or hidden power. So if you're trying to engage with something to get some kind of hidden knowledge or hidden power that's outside the scope of God's public revelation,
Mm,
and then you're doing so through whatever means, which is not prayer,
mm,
and it's not kind of devotional exercises or the proper worship of
yeah,
God, then inherently you're looking into something which is occult.
yeah,
And so I think when it comes to Ouija boards and tarot and all the rest of it, it's trying to obtain a knowledge outside of what God has given us, and
yeah,
that's where we're opening up doorways to entities. Sometimes it can just be just basic trickery,
yeah.
but there's also the reality that the demonic is real,
Mm,
and those things can be an opening to be invitational
yeah.
to those forces of darkness.
Yeah. And I think sometimes what I hear is, people living in Australia or America or these sort of first world countries are like, well, yeah, I suppose it's real, but you don't see that here. People are just living their normal lives, right? But I remember, I lived in Tasmania for a few years. And I'll tell you, like, this stuff is real and
Yeah.
practiced in our country, like massively. I'll give you one example. They had a festival there, very famous festival in the middle of winter called the Dark Mofo.
Mm.
And a lot of the Christians were worried about it because they seemed to have a lot of satanic elements about
Mm.
it. It was all about sort of darkness and stuff like that. And one time, literally, there was a hugely controversial artwork. They call them all
Mm.
artworks, where they basically had a 3-hour performance where a few people were tied to crosses,
Mm.
naked, and then they basically slaughtered a bull, took 500 liters of its blood, and made these people drink the blood, throw it all over
Mm.
themselves. I know this is very visceral, but
Yeah.
this is a reality, right? And you can see what this is mocking in
Mm.
a
Yeah.
horrific way, right?
Mm.
And then all of them were meant to cook the bull and participate in eating this bull
Mm.
at the end, right?
Yeah.
And it was and they would like when they would pour it over the people, it would be going down their
Mm.
throats all over. It was
Yeah.
horrific sort of mockery. And people view it as art. There
Yeah.
was an artist who came up with this thing. Now, the biggest protest, funnily enough, came from animal rights groups.
Wow. Yeah.
And it almost got cancelled, but it didn't. And it went ahead. And so I was looking at this going, this is a severe mockery
Mm.
of the body and blood of Jesus, of his crucifixion, right? Which is what it was meant to be.
Mm.
And get this, do you know what night they did that performance on? It was close to midnight. It was the vigil of Corpus Christi.
Wow.
And
Mm.
I'm like, these are just facts that I've said
Yeah.
about this
Yeah.
performance, but you can start to read into these things, what's happening in the background.
Yeah.
Like none of this is, done by
Yeah.
accident or anything like that. And that's just one example of things I've seen of, yeah. And then there's actual witchcraft, Satanism present publicly now.
Yeah.
And this is one example around the world.
Yeah. Look, I think, I mean, what you're describing is often it's a question of, do people have eyes to see?
Yeah,
Will
that's
they
it.
actually give credence to things that are outside their ordinary experience? I mean, the very notion of that word, occult, means it is by nature hidden,
Mm,
and you've really got to go looking for it or have kind of eyes to recognize it. I think the whole world, the scales are ripped from everyone's eyes simultaneously
mm.
with the recent kind of revelation of the Epstein files
Yeah.
stuff. There was so much in there which was so
Yes.
horrific to read about in the way in which these dark practices were happening in
Yeah.
conjunction with human trafficking. So to say that this kind of dark side of humanity is not tied in with the spiritual, I think would be intentionally putting blinders over one's eyes.
Yeah.
I think as well, even in my own experience as a priest, I've only been in the ministry for about 4 years. I've had a number of people often will come to me with one form or another claiming spiritual affliction.
Mm.
Now, there's some things that I'm able to assist with in terms of prayers of deliverance and different things like that. All of this can become very complicated, and the church
Yeah.
is very reasonable about all of this stuff because it recognizes the reality of mental illness.
Yeah.
It recognizes OCD. It recognizes trauma and depression. All of these kind of things, which
And it takes the filtering of that very seriously.
exactly.
Is this spiritual? Is this not? Or
Yeah.
is it a mix of both, right?
Because otherwise, we just kind of open ourselves to mockery.
Yeah.
But I think there are kind of lesser cases where people will want their house blessed
Mhm.
because of a sense of
Yep.
darkness, and have been greatly relieved
Yeah.
after a blessing. And people might hear this and just say, "Oh, placebo" or whatever. But I mean, I can only speak from my
Mm.
experience. Same thing with kind of mental images that
Yep.
seem as though they're from outside. And in one in particular case, it wasn't all that long ago. Actually, someone was hanging around the parish car park, looked very disturbed, and basically said that their house was haunted, and well, it was all kinds of couldn't sleep because of the fear.
Mm.
Anyway, I brought a friend with me to pray, just to go and bless this person's house. And as I walked in, the entire house was filled with crystals. There was pentagrams scratched into the walls. You
Wow.
had candles burning everywhere. You had
Wow.
every witchcraft book in the in the universe, really. All of
Gee.
these things, bookshelves that had
Mm.
peppercorn stuff all over the ground to protect against evil
Oh,
spirits.
gee,
And
gee,
this
gee.
this young woman was practicing witchcraft on the daily,
Mm.
certainly suffering a mental illness,
Yeah.
and as well, in conjunction with that, but was absolutely terrified. And it was something where my advice in that instance was to basically just say, get rid of everything. I did, bless the place, said prayers with her. She wasn't a professing or believing Christian,
Mhm.
but was very clearly disturbed
Yeah.
by this stuff. And so when I hear like this stuff doesn't happen, I mean, I just know that is false,
Oh,
because
yeah.
in my short time, I've seen that and other such examples
Mm.
where people start on one little thing and it leads deeper and deeper, and people find themselves in very dark places.
Yeah. And I mean, I've not experienced it personally in my life, but I've seen it with people I know, even my wife.
Mm.
When she had quite a troubled past at one stage, and when she was really coming back to the Lord, she would have some demonic dreams where she'd wake up
Mm.
and there'd be like someone pushing down on
Mm.
her really hard and whatnot. So she experienced that, and I know that's been a common one for many people
Yep.
who have experienced the demonic in some way. And I know a priest, for example, who had a really, really bad past, and he had an experience of what he says was the devil. And I mean, Cardinal Pell knew about this as well, and that was the first time he went to mass
Mm.
after that, is because he was just so scared from what he
Yeah.
saw, and now he's a priest.
Yeah.
Like God took him on this beautiful journey, and so that his conversion almost started by seeing
Yeah.
the reality of evil,
Yeah.
so much so that he went the other way, and then obviously opened himself up to the Lord's will here. Now, look, I don't laugh at this, but I have
Mm.
a bit
Yeah.
of a chuckle because I've never experienced that myself, this sort of fantastical
Yeah.
demonic. I always say the devil doesn't give me those experiences because I'm too easy for him to just get with normal sin,
Yeah.
right? And that's me. So let's bring it back to that, because in reality, these fantastical experiences, yes, they exist, but they're a lot rarer
Yeah.
than the reality of where we see the demonic all the time, or actually, like you said, where we don't have the eyes to see
Yeah.
perhaps the
Yeah.
demonic all the time. And that is in our own sinfulness
Yeah.
and struggle of the day to day, right?
Absolutely. Look, I think this is possibly the most important part of this podcast,
Mm.
and it's to take a reasonable view. It's on the one hand to recognize that the spiritual exists. We are as human beings, we are body and we are spirit, and there is a spiritual element
Yeah.
in which we can engage with God, but there's
Yeah.
also evil. But on the other hand, so much of the struggles of our life is simply the boring battle with sin,
Yeah.
with the everyday, temptations of the flesh, temptations toward pride, all of those
Yes.
things with which are so common to us that we almost write them off as not important.
Yeah.
And I think the real problem becomes when, because the spiritual is occult, it's kind of hidden. There is that fantastical element to it. People become obsessed with it to this point where it becomes the overruling spirituality of their life,
Mm.
where it becomes so much about these spiritual entities that they almost neglect any sense of personal responsibility.
Yes.
So every sin that they commit is a spiritual attack. Every temptation they feel is, it's the devil.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important to know the devil's not around every corner in your life. So often it's going to be the simple, working towards holiness, the simple work of sanctification. And the best things that we can do is just stay close to God in prayer, make a
Mm.
good confession, go to mass, be in relationship
Yeah.
with God. And those things are hard enough as they are on their
Yeah.
own to live a good and holy life. But to be constantly, having your mind brought to these images of the demonic is going to be, it gives too much glory
Yeah.
to Satan. And I think it's not helpful spiritually.
Yeah. And it's not even that the devil is not around every corner. It's just that when we're focusing so much on the person, you
Mm.
could say, of the devil and the persons of the demons,
Yeah.
we forget how they're actually already at work
Yeah.
in our own,
Yeah.
temptations and sinfulness, right?
Yeah.
That's the issue here, is because when we look towards the fantastical, we forget the ordinary, which is how they work most. Like, I know in my life, just to give an example, comparison's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
I always compare, and the devil gets me easy with that one, because I can get into discouragement, and I'm like the optimist in the family, right? But I can get discouraged so easy through comparison.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy's got something I don't have, or he's doing something I want to be doing and I'm
Yeah.
not, and all these things, and I can get really discouraged.
Yeah.
Or pride, you mentioned as well, big one for me. Ego's a big thing for me. I like when people stroke my ego.
Yeah.
When they don't, I think there's something wrong, and I start to get discouraged then as
Sure.
well. So all these little things, if I'm focusing on the fantastical, then what's happening with me is I'm getting worse and worse in this sin. And the irony is, while I'm trying to focus on the fantastical demonic, I'm actually going further and
Yeah.
further into the
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
evil stuff, because I'm forgetting that that's the way that the devil works most.
Look, I think there's a great analogy I was once told from the seminary spiritual director, which I think helps people visualize a little bit how this interplay kind of works in terms of our own human life as well as the spiritual. And he just gives the image of our souls as we go through life are kind of like a train, right? And we're on the train tracks, and we're heading kind of in that direction. And so ultimately we're in control of that train. And the way in which the spiritual can kind of impact is by putting freight on that train. So it's making it kind of heavier. So you mentioned, like say something like comparison. For me, it would be kind of self-image stuff. The devil knows the levers, which
Exactly.
to
He
kind of
knows our weaknesses, where we're vulnerable, right?
exactly all the vulnerabilities, and so it's kind of load up the freight on that train so that it's harder to stop going in a particular direction. So think of it as, and there's like the switch that can kind of change the direction of the track. It's like we want to be in control of the direction and the choices that we make.
Yeah.
And so the impact of the demonic is putting a lot of freight on the train, so it becomes so heavy that we can't stop. And the other one might be gumming up the gears, so it becomes harder to make the decision. But ultimately, we are the ones who are driving. We are the ones who are in control. But the spiritual can make things difficult. They're not the ones, except in the very rare case of full-on possession, where decisions are being made basically for you.
And that's where we can sort of lean into the angels and the saints and the Lord for this one, because really we know, like, God thrashes everyone. Like, he doesn't even have to click his fingers and evil's gone, right? And I know, I mean, I even do this in little ways. I always say the angel of God prayer every time I drive in the car. It's just something I do for protection over the car. And do you know how many times I've almost had a car accident right after I said that prayer?
Yeah.
And straight away I go, Lord, like, thank you, guardian angel, for protecting me, just because I take that seriously. That's just a small thing, right? But I also find, and I mean, this is, I think, universal, right after confession, or right after, I've had a good session in adoration, and I'm doing well with my prayers, my spirit's always lifting. I'm able to, it's like I've got this armor that's better to easier for me to hold off sin. And the longer I go without confession, or the longer I go where I'm not saying, the prayers I'm committed to, or whatever it is, I find myself going further and further down into this sort of sin and squalor and stuff like that. So the reality of angels and the saints and in helping us is huge. And of course, I mean, you mentioned confession. We've got the Eucharist, Eucharistic adoration, Mass, obviously the highest form of worship. All of these things are genuine ways we can protect ourselves. Would you say there are any more? I mean, I've got the Rosary here. Like, this is a big one, right? When it comes to the spiritual battle, because it is a battle. I think we've made that clear. There's a battle here between good and evil. And we're not fighting it, fantastically always. We're fighting it inside in the ordinary. And I know, the Rosary, for example, is a massive weapon,
Mm.
because just focusing on the life of Jesus, asking for the intercession of Our Lady, and she's the one that crushes
Mm.
the head of the serpent,
Yeah.
right? So it's
I think there's so many prayers and devotions. It begins with the sacraments, the most powerful. They're the kind of the bazookas,
yeah,
uh, the absolute powerhouse where we always should begin. And every kind of exorcist will even talk about how a good confession, made willingly, made faithfully, made with true contrition, is more powerful than any rite of exorcism. And so I think that's just important to acknowledge the power of the Eucharist, receiving the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. But then traditional prayers like the Rosary is simply staying open and staying close to the inspiration of God, the power of the Holy Spirit, God's grace. You mentioned earlier praying to your guardian angel. In my childhood, there was one of my earliest memories was I stepped out from behind a car where I was growing up. I looked to my left and there was a car coming down the hill, and I just remember closing my eyes and then just opening them, and I'm on the other side of the road. My dad was on a ladder painting our house, and he kind of was like yelling out, and the woman who was in the car slammed on the brakes and just swerved off the road and just kind of sat there, and she basically went into shock because she was convinced that she had hit me. There was no way that she could have missed me.
wow,
And then I'm just kind of standing there, happy. My dad's kind of like in absolute all sorts, not
disbelief.
knowing, and
Shit.
he went over to her, and she basically was frozen to the wheel. I credit that, for what it's worth, to the protection of my guardian angel. I can't see a way in which that could have happened. I remember
Wow.
it very distinctly, but it's always been for me a memory of the protection of my guardian angel. So I think asking just God's presence, God's protection, all the angels, all the saints,
Yeah.
is going to do so much more good than worrying about the effects of the demonic.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I love Our Lady. That's a big one. St. Joseph's another one. Terror
Yeah.
of Demons.
Terror
you
of
know.
demons,
If
absolutely.
you want anyone to give him a good thrashing,
Yeah.
go to him as well. But yeah, look, I think we've covered it quite well there, Father.
Yeah.
Like, I think what you said at the end there is really what we want to wrap up with.
Mm.
Like, this is a reality. It is a battle, but we fight it with what the church has already given us in
Yep.
the sacraments, with the saints, with the angels, and we know who wins in the end, right?
Absolutely.
And it
It's
ain't
not
the
it's
evil
not an
ones.
equal battle.
No,
It's
not
not
at
an
all.
equal battle.
It's not an arm wrestle like you
Yes,
see with
exactly.
with Jesus and
Yeah.
and like the devil
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
right.
It's like
Christ has already won, and these are the spot fires that have been put out.
yeah,
So,
spot on. Well, look, we're going to end it there, Father. Thank you so much to all of you guys watching right now. Let us know what you think. Did you agree with everything we're saying? Did you like some of our points? Were they fair, or did you think it was all absolute garbage? Let us know. We're keen to hear your thoughts as well. And until next time, remember to keep it real
and keep the faith.